All right, so I'd like you to find two numbers that multiply to 39 and add to 36. Molly, what would those two numbers be?
3 and 13.
Perfect, 3 and 13. Okay, so when I'm doing this is something we call X marks the spot. And when I do these and I get myself into some trouble, let's say with a big number, one thing I do for a visual is I might create a factor tower in case I don't know what numbers to put in my X marks the spot. So when I have 12, my factors are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. And right away that kind of gives me a little visual. And so my question is, I want to know what multiplies. So I want the product for negative 12. And I want the sum or difference for 1. So if I'm looking at the sum or difference, now that I've got all the factors, now all I'm looking for is the sum or difference. And I say 3 and 4. If I add or subtract 3 or 4, I end up with 1. And so that 4 would have to be positive, and the 3 would have to be negative. Since 1 is positive, the bigger overall number has to be positive. Okay, now I'd like you to try the rest of these. Now you don't have to make the factor tower. That's only if you get in trouble. Pause the recording and try the next 3. Okay, let's check our work. I'm going to take off. So what did you get for 4 and negative 4, Alexander?
I got -2 and -2.
-2 and -2. Okay. The next one, let's go, Oscar.
I got -2 and
-2 and +2. Okay. Next one, Alan.
I got 12 and -2.
12 and -2. Perfect. And then the next one.
14 and -3.
Perfect. Okay. I've got some more for you to try. Ready? I want to know what multiplies to 56 and adds to 15. What is it? We have an 8 and a 7. Good. Okay, so we're going to try some more. You got to get fast at these. Shh. All right, pause the recording and try these. Okay, now let's check our work. Let's go, Spencer. What? I can't hear you. Positive 10, negative 4, negative 10, positive 4. Because when the number is negative, the bigger number needs to be negative. The next one, 80 and -21. Let's go, Chris. Okay, so when you get in trouble, you don't get to say, I don't know. Because you're going to get stuff like 524. Okay, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to make yourself a little table. And you're going 1 and 80. 2 times what? I'm talking to Chris. 2 times what, Chris? Okay, 3 times? No, 4. Shh. 4 times 20. 5. 16. 7, no, 8 times 10. Do any of those add or subtract to 21? Yeah. Okay, 5 and 16. Chris, tell me what the signs are going to be. Both negative. Negative 16, negative 5, add to negative 21. One might be negative. We play with the signs afterwards. Okay, next one, Mia Brown.
Negative 22 and 2.
Negative 22 and positive 2 make negative 20. Good. Next one, Litzy. Good. Next one, okay, Mary.
Negative 12 and 4.
Negative 12 and 4. Okay, questions? Yes.
You said that the negative should be on the bigger number, so why?
Only if it depends. You got to play with them. On the bigger number, where?
Like negative 10 and 4. Somebody said 10 to negative 4.
Right, but that was wrong. because that would have made, when they add up, it would have made positive 6. So if your number down here is negative, and you have one that's negative, one that's positive, it's got to go with the bigger number, right? All right, so now I think we're ready to start factoring. We are factoring, and really the basic formula is ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are integers. But for today's factoring, we call this just trinomial factoring, where a equals 1. In this case, a is equal to 1. You will never see a coefficient here other than 1 in today's factoring, which tends to be, don't worry about when x is positive and when it's negative. Forget about the rule here because we're going to use our x marks the spot. Now, when we were doing this last week, we said the last two terms, when we add them up, it gives us the coefficient of the middle term, right? And when we multiply the last two terms, it gives us the product gives us the last term. Are you with me?
Yes.
So we're kind of going the same way. Remember, sum here is from these last two terms, right? So when we do this, we're going to make our own little x marks the spot. Now, we want our product to go up top. Our product, the last term, always goes, I guess here, let me do it here. The product always goes on top. Product. And this is your sum or difference. Okay, so what would go on top? What number? Yep. 10. And what goes on the bottom? Positive 7. Okay, so what two numbers multiply to 10 but add to positive 7? Right there, Matthew.
5 and 2.
5 and 2. It doesn't matter. I could do 5 and 2, 2 and 5. Positive 5, positive 2. So what happens when I factor, okay, we know that x squared, it's got to be an x and an x. What fits in the other part? Plus 5, plus 2. Got it? Plus 5, plus 2. You with me?
Yes.
Super easy. Just got to get fast at it. Now, you'll see in my PowerPoint, they just list factor pairs. You might get to a point where you're not doing x marks the spot. Like, by the time we're in chapter 13, you're probably not doing x marks the spot. You can do everything in your head. My son does it probably more often, like, I think he's always done factor pairs, but he just does them in his head. But for now, we're going to give ourselves a visual, okay? And I promise you, it will get so automated for you. It'll be like your multiplication tables. So let's do the first one together. What number do I put up top, Sophia? 20. And what one goes on the bottom? 9. Remember, this is a sum or difference. You don't need to keep writing that. I'm just reminding you. Okay. What two numbers, Daniela, multiply to 20 but add to 9?
5 and 4.
Positive 5, positive 4. So this becomes, remember, the root of x squared is x. So I've got to have an x and an x to get me an x squared. And then I'm going to have a plus 5 plus 4. You with me? Questions?
So if it's not factorable, when, like, if you can't multiply and you can't add to get those, would you?
Say not factorable. Okay, so now you're going to do 2 and 3. Pause the recording and finish the other two. All right, so by rights on the last one, you saw the equal sign. Well, these are expressions, so I don't want to see you adding equal signs. I'd like to see on the homework for tonight, you making an X marks the spot right next to it. What number goes on top?
12.
What goes on the bottom?
3.
Okay, what are my two factors? Negative 6, negative 2. And so we get y minus 2, y minus 6. Just in the spirit of time, what is the answer for number 3? I'm not going to do the x. Chris?
M minus 3 and M minus 4.
M minus 4. Now, we can check ourselves. Does these two add to negative 7? Do these two multiply to 12? Okay? You can always check yourself. You can FOIL it back. All right. We have a bunch more to do. Okay, let's try. Go. More. Pause it. Shh, pause the recording and do the next 5. We're going to check our work. So for number 1, go, Sophia.
For number 1, I got x plus 7, x plus 6.
Good. Perfect. Okay, the next one. Number 2, let's go with Sav.
I got m minus 7, m minus 3.
Perfect. Okay, next one, number 3. Let's go with Ben.
1 minus 3, 1 minus 4.
Okay, looks good. Number 4, let's go Zach. That's correct. It is not factorable. Okay. Number 5, Daniel.
I got x minus 8 times x minus 3.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Don't worry about when C is negative, because when we do X marks the spot, it doesn't matter. I've already trained you on how to deal with that. We're still doing what multiplies to C and what adds up to B, add or subtracts to B. So we're not really even going to deal with this rule. It's not something that I'm going to quiz you on. Now, we're going to skip ahead in the interest of time, and we're going to go to, just a reminder, we've started with greatest monomial factor. When we factor, the very first thing we're going to see is a problem. The first thing we look for is to GCF it. Then, if it's a binomial, the only kind of binomial that can be factored is the difference of squares. If it's a trinomial, it could be a trinomial square, or it could be just plain trinomial factoring. That's what we're dealing with today. So step 1, what do I do first? What do I do first? Cubby.
Divide by 3.
Factor a 3. I don't want to divide a 3 out. I want to factor it. So then I'm left with what?
3 times x squared plus 7x plus 6. So that's
Plus 12. Good. Now we can factor that more. So how does that break down? I'm going to do my x marks the spot. And what multiplies to 12 and adds to 7? Go. 5 and 2.
Oh, 10 and 2.
Okay. Shh. Excuse me, recording. Okay, go. 3 and 4. And 3. What's the final answer, Alan?
Well, x plus 3
3 times x plus 3
and x plus 4.
times x plus 4. Not and, times. Okay? Next one. Let's go on, how do I, remember when we do our X marks the spot? When we do our X marks the spot, we're still doing this. What makes this problem different than the others? Daniela?
Even though the bottom one is negative, the number is greater?
No. Daniel?
5 is a quadratic term.
5, x is the linear term is quadratic, and the first term is to the 4th power. So, this means that something's going to be a little bit different. Okay, so first of all, what are my numbers that multiply to 4 but add to negative 5? I see in the back there, Spencer? Right, negative 4 and negative 1. Now, so when we are factoring right here, we said negative 4, what multiplies to 4 and adds to negative 5. When we are, and he said negative 4, negative 1. When I make my factors, what's the root of x to the 4th? X squared, right? Now over here, depending on if I need a variable over here is if this has a variable. Does it? No. So I'm just going to put my minus 1, minus 4. But guess what? We can factor more. X squared minus 1 is factors out to what?
X plus 1
Times.
the of x minus 1.
Right, that's called a difference of squares. And the next one is x plus 2 times x minus 2. And that is my final answer. Okay, questions? All right, let's go on to the next two. Okay, so this one is a little bit different. Now we have two variables. Notice there's a variable here, and in my constant term, it's here. I'm still making my x marks the spot and putting my positive 6 here and my negative 5 here. What are my factors? Mia? Negative 3, negative 2. Now, step 1, go to the chart. What do we do? GCF. What's the GCF? We're going to keep going. Y. Y. I'm now left with y squared minus 5ay plus... All right, I shut off the recording, so I'm going to go back and redo this slide. So this is another kind of exception where they have multiple situations. So we start with our problem, and the very first thing we do is GCF. And our GCF is a y. And so what I'd be left with would be y squared minus 5ay plus 6a squared. Now we're still going to do our x marks the spot. And remember, the middle term goes down below, negative 5, and the last term goes here. So what multiplies to 6 but adds or subtracts to negative 5? And one of our students said negative 2 and negative 3. They both multiply to positive 6 and they add to negative 5. And so now, don't get worried about this a squared here. Okay, I'm going to show you how to deal with that. We're still going to make our two factors. We know that the way that we break up y squared is a y times a y. And the way we break up that to get that x squared in that second place, we've got to break it up as an a and an a. That will give me the a squared there. And that also gives me that inner term of an ay and the other outer ay. Does that make sense? So we're going to leave that there. And now all we really have everything we need, which is that negative 3a and negative 2a. And the order doesn't matter. I could have said y minus, but I've got to bring down that y. If I don't, so many kids lose points because they forget to bring that and include it. All right, last problem. We're going to break it down, make our two factors. How do I break down x to the fourth? It's x squared times x squared makes x to the fourth. I'm still doing my x marks the spot. What multiplies to negative 12 and adds to negative 1, sorry, in the middle. And that would be a 4 and a 3. If you forget, remember, just make a little factor tower. 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. That gives you the little visual. And so for this to be negative, the 4 would have to be negative. So now I'm doing plus 3 and minus 4. I usually put my positives to the left because my negatives could potentially be something I can break down more. And what do you have? A difference of squares there with that x squared minus 4. So now I'm going to bring down what I had, x squared plus 3, and then of course we've got to break down that x squared minus 4 to x plus 2x minus 2, and this is my entire answer. Now, very quickly, if I leave my answer like this, it would be considered wrong because it's not fully factored. So my final answer is the quantity of x squared plus 3 times the quantity of x plus 2 times the quantity of x minus 2. And I believe that is the end of the PowerPoint. All right, if you'd like some more problems to work on, we can go right here and pause the recording. And you can practice these, and then I'll put up some answers. Ready? Pause it. Now check your work. So that was just a little bit more extra practice if you needed it and you wanted answers right there. And that's the end of the slideshow.